The next hour, I think, is dedicated to fireflies of Canada and the United States. And we're going to give you a basic introduction on the 21 genera that we have in both countries and how to identify them based on pictures or sometimes even just seeing them out in nature. So these are just a few of the fireflies you can come across in our area. There you have Terotus, Lucidota, Pyrectomena, Chespirito. And so we have 21 genera currently. This is after adjusting or after putting Elychnia into Photinus and all those other things that have happened. And they're in the following subfamilies, as you can see here. And you can see Lampirini is the majority of the genera we have, and they're in 5 different tribes, which is Lampirini is the subfamily, and anything with an I at the end is a tribe. So you have Cratomorphini, Lamprosarini, Lamperini, Photinini, Pleotomini, and that's it. And I think they are the genera we talk about are in the order as they are on this. So the first one we're going to talk about is Terotus. This is a genus that has 2 species in it. And on the bottom there, Terotus obscuripennis, which is the one you pictured, is the by far most common one. Corticanus is very rarely collected, and I'm not sure how many specimens I've ever collected. I only have ever seen the type. And as you can see, they have very, very elaborate antennae. So you can probably guess they're day active. These antennae are the flare blade kind, fan-shaped, because they have these very long rami, and those rami arise from the segments 3 to 10. They are the rami by themselves are longer than the actual antennomeres. As you can see here, the antennomeres are fairly short and the rami are way longer. And in a way, if you are out and you're familiar with them, you could mistake these guys for a phangodid or a railroad worm. But here the head is mostly covered underneath the pronotum or the head shield. So when you look here, you can barely see the head. It's basically completely covered. These guys are day active, probably mostly found sweeping or sitting on buildings or so. That's I see a lot of pictures on iNaturalist where they sit on buildings. And yeah, like I said, only in California as far as we know. And it's a very great picture by Kat Halsey from iNaturalist. And if anybody goes out collecting for these, if you come across Terotus corticonus, the other species, it has very much shorter rami. I would be very interested in some. And here's the arrow that points to the rami. It's also known as, I think, as the California glowworm. These are some of the immature. So this is the larvae. It is not described, despite that there's seemingly plenty of pictures on iNaturalist and Bug Guide or so, but it's not been officially described. So if you catch some and you want to work on something like that, please let me know. The second genus we're going to talk about is the only member of the subfamily Ototretinae, which is mainly Asian. And we only have one genus here. It's also only found in California. Very small fireflies, only like 2 to 3 millimeters long, both species. They have the corners of the pronotum or head shields, like you can see here. They have them projecting to the side, so they're kind of like in a point. And then where the arrow posts, they have these sublateral pits. They have these like little pits at the backside of the a head shield. And that's actually a character that you can use to put it classified in the subfamily Ototretinae. They all have that. And these are, again, the only two members. They do not glow or flash. Also not very commonly collected. I've only ever seen one specimen of each. And this is a picture on the right side of the type, I think, from the California Academy of Science. Also, if you collect any of these, I would be interested. Any museum, I think it would be, I think, great to have more specimens of this. Very rare. Then next, we get to the subfamily Lamprohyzinae. There's two genera in the world in this. We have one of them, Phausis. These are, I think, fairly well known in the East Coast because they're called the, one of them is called the blue ghost. And they're kind of like, when they fly, they don't flash. They kind of like make this elongated glow, which then makes it look like they have like this, when you photograph them like with long exposure, they have this light trail after them. The pronotum has these kind of like semi-transparent windows where you can see through, you can see the eyes through them. They're also not very big. They're like maybe a little bigger than half a centimeter. The eyes are touching or nearly so in most of them, most species. The head is deeply concave, so above the eyes, there's like this dip, like cave-like dip, and the pygidium is not predominantly yellow in most of them, compared to some other fireflies that you could mistake this for. And you can see here the male on the top, this is a male, and on the bottom is a female. So they can see the females don't fly. They don't even have wing butts, so they don't have any elytra. They sit down in the grass, and the males try to find them. So when you are out here, so blue ghost, you go to Tennessee, North Carolina has a lot of them, a lot of species. And if you want to see the immatures, which are also not described, but plenty of pictures, please see Lynn Forst's book on page 93. Very good pictures of them. There is a lot of species. There's like, I think 10 species or so currently. There's a revision in progress. So a colleague is looked at these, all the species that are known, and she, I think, found some new species. And there's also a possible new species in the Piedmont and coastal plains. And hopefully this paper will come out fairly soon. And then we're going to have a nice, very well illustrated paper and key so you can identify which species you have. There's also some species in the west coast of the US, Oregon and Washington. And this species, one of the species or two are also up in Canada. So here's other currently known species. So we have 10. Phausis rhombica is known from Canada. There is a revision by Fender from 1966, which the new one will update this. This one should be in the folder that Candace has, I think, shared with you. And there's some other literature here on the right side that is has a lot of information and might be interesting to you. Again, if you want any of these, please let me know. I can share them. I can't make them available for the group because of copyright reasons, but I can share them with you individually if you're interested. And then here on the bottom is a very nice long exposure photograph of maybe the blue ghost, which some people observe as blue. I do not. I've seen them in Tennessee. It's more like a green light to me. It's not bluish, but they leave these light trails. Very nice thing to see if you ever get in the area there and can observe them in like June or July, May, I think late May and June actually is more common. Please do. Next, the genus Bysalonica. It's a fairly big genus with like 30 plus species, but only one in the US. And then you go further south into Mexico and all the way down into South America. That's where the biggest diversity is. They're not on any of the islands in the West Indies, but this one, Bysalonica Vickers hamorum, described by Joe Cicero, is in Arizona. And there's also a subspecies, Vickers hamorum picium. I've only seen the nominal species, Vickers hamorum, but this is also one of the species we'll learn about later. So if you catch this, a good way to identify this is to look at the claws. The claws are bifid. So if you look at each of the claws on each leg, they are split on both sides. That's the best character to differentiate this from any of the other genera we have in the US, and especially from Photuris, which is the most closely related genus we have in the US. And then the pygidium at the end is red with pink or red. You can't quite see that here, but here at the end, it usually has pink or red. And it has a hunched position. But what I mean by that, I will show you in the next genus, Photuris, but they're kind of like when they sit, their shoulders, which is like at the here, up here, is kind of like higher than the rest of the body, which gives them like this like hunched position or hunched like way to look at. And that's also a good way to identify the subfamily, Photurinae. And so here, Bohorquez, which was a student of Jim Lloyd's and graduated here, she did a taxonomic revision of Bysalonica, but it's only a dissertation. It never got published. And this one has the larvae described by Joe Cicero. In the same paper, he described the adults. And so here you can see the how the larvae look, very similar to Photuris. And he has illustrated the mandibles, the head, and all the parts, and here some more of the head, the parts of the head. So this is very good illustration to identify them and differentiate them from Photuris. Now we come to the genus Photuris. This one has 65 species alone in Canada and the US, a lot more throughout Central and South America. Jim Lloyd studied this from the beginning of his career and basically till he died 2020. And he basically told me once that he studied it 50 years and he still didn't understand it correctly. And here's this one of the quotes from his book: "If a photon could talk, we could not understand it," by Jack Kelly. And he said, "Photons speak to me and Barber, but I have understood little." So despite all he did, it was still an enigma to him on what's really going on in this genus. To identify them, this one only has the claw on one side bifid, very distinctly bifid, because there's another genus later that has something very similar, but this one is very distinct bifid or cleft. And here on the bottom right, you can see how this hunched position looks. So the shoulders up here, just before the head shield, are elevated, and it kind of looks like it's hunched over. And this on the top right is a very generic looking Photuris. A lot of the species look exactly like that, with this colored head shield with red and black, and this black vita in the middle. And then, like I said, I think I mentioned before, this stripe on the elytra in the hind forewings is very typical for Photuris. Again, back to the book. If you want to dive into everything there is to know or what we know currently about this, please download this book. Again, here's the address. We can give you the address in the chat or so later. And this is a picture of Jim Lloyd in his office, where he spent basically every day, almost every day, even after retirement until his death, writing the book, studying what he could know about Photuris. And we had lunch every day, and he shared a lot of his thoughts with me, and I still don't understand most of it. And here you have Photuris is also amazing genus. They actually feed on other fireflies, mainly on Pyrectomena and Photinus. And you can see here's a couple of pictures where they have, where they have a couple of prey items. And they actually do this to get some of the defensive chemicals of Photinus and Photuris to then give that to the when they lay eggs, so the eggs are chemically defended. And Jim Lloyd was actually the one that observed this in Nature and published on it in his probably maybe most famous paper in Nature, Aggressive Mimicry in Photuris. And he coined the term firefly femme fatales, because they will lure other fireflies in, and they do that by changing their flash pattern. The females can adjust to the flash pattern of other fireflies that are in the vicinity, and they will flash like a female Photinus of that species, and the male will be fooled and will move in for mating just to be eaten then. And this is one of the, probably one of the coolest things about fireflies that Jim was lucky to observe and, you know, share with us. And it's just a really cool thing to actually see that in nature. I've observed it once, didn't have my camera with it, but so yeah, look out for this. And this is also interesting when you look for flash patterns, look for flying Photuris, flying fireflies. If you see one sitting, it may or may not be the real flash pattern. It may be mimicking something. So it's always better to observe the flying ones. This is a list of the species we have. Canada has only one species, Photuris fairchildi. They used to list Pennsylvanica as a species as well, but since the last paper last year, it's clear that this species only occurs in Delaware and not anywhere else. So Canada is now down to one, while the US has 65 species, which half of them were described by White and a big number also by Barber. So those two are probably the biggest researchers of this genus, and there's still a lot to figure out. And this is a typical larviform of Photuris, and they will be, you know, on in wet habitats and crawling around looking for food. Next genus we're going to talk about is Aspisoma. This one is limited to Florida and Texas. And we have one species, Aspisoma ignitum, which is very interesting. This species is present on almost every single island in the West Indies, every country, every northern country of South America, and throughout Central America. We don't quite know where it's originated, either South or Central America, but it's been transported around by humans across all the islands into Florida. This was first observed in the 90s in Florida, and it comes across the border from Mexico into Texas as well. Really a world traveler as a species, and it's one of the brightest flashes I've ever seen when I saw the species, both in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. It has this oval body shape. It has filiform antennae, the string-like antennae, and it has no translucent spots on the head shield or on the pronotum. And then you can see on the right, this is the adult and some immatures, and you can see there's some of the food sources they have, some of these snails. But you will see them, in southern Texas. I think they're only like in Dade and Monroe County, not further north than that, as far as we know. And then southern Texas, I don't think they reach all the way up to Austin or any further. So very nice firefly and very easily to identify if you see it. This one, genus Micronaspis from Florida. It lives in salt marshes. So it has a pronodal disc, or the head shield, that is raised in the middle. So it's contoured and it's distinctly raised when you look at it from the side. This one also has bifid claws, as you can see here, but they're very, very differently cleft or split than they are in Photinus. So very, I think when you look at them, at a couple of them, and you have them side by side, you can easily identify Photuris from Micronaspis. The pronotum also, as you can see here in this great picture from Richard, is kind of like transparent, and you can see through it. And so that's, and you will find this in Florida in salt marshes. So only on the coast and salt marshes. I think it's protected now based on a petition by the Xerces Society, or will be soon. Not very, it's very common, I think, when you find it, but it's not very easy to find, and the larvae also crawl around in the salt marshes. There's a really short description of the larvae, but not a very detailed one. So someone would be nice for someone to actually do a re-description of the larvae with more detail and pictures. This is a picture of the larvae, and yeah, easily identifiable because those plates on the abdomen, on the they are like divided in the middle, as you can see here. They're split, and they have these two spines. That's as far as I know, no other larvae in the US has that. And then here on the right side is a photo by Richard showing the habitat where you would be able to find this. Oh, and actually, it's also been found in the Bahamas now, and not just in Florida. And there's one more species was recently described of the genus from South America, I think. And there's a few papers here that I would be able to share with you on this genus and species. And here you have the plates. Next big genus this is a bigger one, Pyrectomena with an M. There's also a genus Pyrectomena, which is only from Chile. So sometimes those get confused because of the spelling. There's 16 species, Canada and the US. Easy way to identify these for the US, for our area, is this median keel. Here on this picture, you can see that on the head shield. There's a line running from the base to the apex. This raised kind of like keel, and that, if you see that, that is that's a species of Pyrectomena. And the pronotum is also subpentagonal, which so I think this is one of the easier genera to identify and look at. The revision is in green, 57. I copied that paper in the folder that's shared with you. And here's a few pictures from Lloyd 2018 with different species that he has taken pictures of. Here's the larva of Pyrectomena borealis. This is one of the earliest fireflies that comes out in the year. If you look at the larvae, you see these plates on the abdomen. They have this little like hook kind of like shape, right? So when they, just before they're pupate, they will go on the bark of trees, and they will use those hook to hook themselves into the bark, so they can, so they're kind of like stable and protected during the pupal stage where they can't move. And you can see the head is out on this one, very stretched out. And it's very like streamlined so it can go into the shell of a snail and bite and inject its chemicals. And this larva is actually described by Archanchelsky and Branham in '98. So it's one of the few that's described. The paper, I think, is also in the folder. Here's a list of a lot of papers that have been published on Pyrectomena. There's a few more that I didn't list, but any of them, if you want them, please let me know. Here's a list, and you can see 6 of the 16 species are currently known from Canada. Here's a few. On the left here is a male, and here on the right is a female. You can see the light organs are on segments 6 and 7 are not complete. They are like divided compared to the male that has complete photo organs. This is also very interesting genus, very rarely collected. I have yet to collect one of these. Canalpis. This is also very easily to identify. I think just the shape and the coloration. The coloration is very much like this across the board of any specimen I've seen. There might be a little bit more plaque on the head shield, but otherwise very much the same. No light organ. And the antennae are strongly flattened. If you can kind of see that here, like very broad. And they're serrate, so sawtooth. And it's very broadly elliptical, even more so than Aspisoma that we talked about a little earlier. And this can be found in all the Gulf Coast states, basically from Texas to Florida. Microphotus, Lamperini, there's 7 species from US, Arizona. There's a revision in key by Green from '59, also in the folder. These are the species, and these are like some of the characters you can see to identify them. So when you look at the antennae, on the last segment, there's this tiny, very tiny sub-spherical bead, kind of like, it's kind of like a half round, like a half ball, and it's kind of like glassy, and it's at the end of each of the segment. You need a microscope usually to see it, or a very good camera. This was made with a 5x 65mm camera, and it happened to be that that little subspherical bead showed up. It's like right here, this little white bead there, right under the arrow. There's not too many genera that have it, and the other genera are very different. The antennae have 10 or fewer antennal segments. The number of the antennal segments are used in the key to identify between the species. You can see that this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the abdominal spiracles, which are the breathing organs, they are ventral in these guys. Some other genera have them dorsally, but in these guys, they're ventral. And but they're also very distinctive looking, I think. A lot of the species in general look exactly like the picture on the top there. All right, next genus in the same subfamily and tribe is Nelsonphotus. Very, very rare and not often collected. I think Arizona and maybe California is the distribution for these guys. The pronotum is angulate anteriorly. So like you have these little angles. Ventral segment 8 has a digitated apical process. So here on that picture with the number 7, what it looks like is a B, where the arrow B points at. There's little process from that 8th segment is a good way to identify this genus. The only other one in the US that has this is Bichellomica. But as you can see, they look very different. So it should be easy to identify, but there's not many specimens have actually been caught. And the antennal segments are squat and cylindrical. So if you see them, they're like very kind of like compressed, and then but they're very round. So, and the coloration, I mean, it's one of the, I think, most distinct fireflies we have. And there's only one species, Nelsonphotus aridus. This is also a very nice genus, also from Arizona, Phausis. Interestingly, not in the same tribe as Phausis, but kind of like named, has the same part in the genus name. One species, Phausis eximius. You've seen this before when we talked about holotypes. The antennae have 11 segments. The pronotum has none of the windows like Phausis would have. And here again, that antennomere has these subspherical beat. And very different from the other genus we talked about with these beats, from the coloration, and it's also much smaller, I think. Prolophera, by Joe Cicero, described by Joe Cicero. This was described in the genus Lampiris, which was previously, before this species was described in it, not known from the New World, from the US, from North, Central, South America, and since then has been moved into its new genus Prolophera. It's also known from Arizona in the US and then Mexico. Pronototal margins strongly upward flanged. So when you look at the pronotum from the side, it would be kind of like moved upward. And then the scape, though, the first segment of the antennae is 3 times longer than the first flagellomere, which would be the third segment. So the first is 3 times as long as the third segment of the antennae. And these guys actually come to black light. And they also have windows, smaller than in Phausis, very different distribution from Phausis. And they lose a lot of color, I think, after they die. So there might be a little more nicer brown life. And this picture is from Cornell, and that's where the holotype is also deposited. Now we get into a little bit about the bigger genera and the ones you probably are more likely to find. The genus Lucidota. There's 4 species known from the US. There's hundreds of species in the New World. It's kind of like what we call the garbage bin of species. A lot of times, any kind of firefly that had these serrate or saw-tooth antennae that we couldn't play, or some people couldn't place in a different genus, was lumped into this one, and people are actually looking now at the species to see what's going on. But they have, like I said, they have these flattened and serrate or sawtooth antennae. And the pronotum is either subpentagonal or triangular. Sorry. And so one of the 4 species is actually a fossil. So we won't find this again. And then the other 3 species are more or less regularly found, especially Lucidota atra. Luticalis is a southern species, if it's out in Florida, it is very abundant, but you have to find the right habitat for it. And atra is the only one in Canada. Again, Branneman and Arjanschelsky described the larva of and pupa of Lucidota atra. Jim Lloyd talks about this firefly in his book, one of the few chapters that is not on Photuris. And you can see here is a picture of the different ways the pronotum, so the head shield can look, and the markings on the head shield. So don't be fooled by that there's a little less or a little more of black than you're used to. That's just a very, just a variation of the pronotum. And Lucidota atra, I think, is very common. They are day flying, and very, I think, very commonly observed. This is a cool genus, Phosphaenus, only in Canada, only in the Maritimes. This came over from Europe. This is one of the 4 big, most common, most known species in Europe, Phosphaenus hemipterus. The antennae are compressed, but not serrate, so not sawtooth. They have very, very short elytra. And like you can see here, the elytra do not cover the whole abdomen. And then usually the last 5 of the abdominal dorsites, so the abdominal segments from above, are visible and strongly lobed. So here on the sides, they're strongly lobed. But like I said, only in Canada. I'm not sure if it's very abundant, but it's definitely one of the most known European fireflies, and very many publications on them. Larvae are described, the larvae are described by Martin Novak. Very nice paper with lots of detail. So yeah, that's one of the interesting genera that, yeah, they're not from here, but were found in the Maritimes, probably brought over by some ship ballast or something they had to dump. This is the larva of Phosphaenus. And like I said, there's a few papers here. It's just 3 of the ones. But Novak redescribed the immature stages. Raphael de Kock, the sexual communication, and some other things. And Machka and McIver were the ones that published on finding it in North America. Now, the second biggest of all the genera in the US. This is the biggest genus of fireflies in the world. There's over 440 species currently described, with 48 just coming out this year from the Zaragoza lab in Mexico. We have a few of the lab members in this workshop, and they are widely distributed. Despite, so don't look at the Arizona. They're widely distributed in the U.S., mostly in the eastern part. The identification. So this is, yeah, they have filiform antennae, those thread-like antennae with 11 segments. The elytra, so the forewings have usually this lateral, a pale border which goes around the elytron. So there's a border on the lateral, on the outside, but also on the middle where the elytrons meet. And they are parallel-sided or long oval. So long oval is mostly like your previous Elychnia or so, but most of them are parallel-sided. A lot of times, you will need the flash pattern to identify these, or if they're already dead, the genitalia need to be extracted, which we will talk about more. This is a good graphic from Zaragoza Caballero, their recent paper, where they show the different parts of the genitalia, and there's a revision of the North American species by Green, 56. It's in your folder. And here's just a couple of species, very typical looking Photinus species. Here is a nice picture by Pyrectomena of a species he collected with the dorsal view, the ventral view. So you can see here the light organs on segments 6 and 7. And here he dissected this genitalia. So this is the male genitalia of this firefly. We've seen this female that can fly and has very shortened elytra before by the amazing picture of Photinus colustrans by Dave Almquist. And this is the below view of a female, and you can see the light organ of the female is very much reduced compared to the male. And there's also some Photinus species that do not have light organs at all, such as Photinus ilichnia, Photinus coruscus. This is a picture of flash patterns of Photinus paralis, which is the most common maybe and most published on firefly species in the world. It used to be caught by thousands of kids in the 70s and 80s, which got paid by Sigma chemical company to extract the lucibophagen, not the lucibophagens, the chemicals they produce to make light. And here you can see this is Photinus paralis, and you can see it makes this J-shaped flash pattern. So it turns on and kind of makes like a J-shaped flash pattern dip. Very common if you go into northern Georgia and up into Canada. One of the most common species, I think, very adapted to living even in towns with light pollution. And when they're out, there's a lot of them out usually. You will not see this in South Georgia or Florida. Very rarely you see a couple of specimens, but it's very very rare. So if you want to see those, go up more in the northern states. Here's a little more information on this whole, what happened with ilichnia. So this is the first paper on the left, the upper one. Fireflies from central Mexico, description of 37 new species. And the second picture on the bottom, you see this little, the second line, Ilichnia planchard, 1845, synonymy novum, so new synonymy. This is the paper that Ilichnia was sunk into Photinus based on the description of new species, but not really based on any evidence other than saying that the genitalia are the same. And then in 2023, the same lab came out with a paper looking at all kinds of morphological characters, analyzing them and showing a phylogeny, showing that the different Ilichnia species, as we knew them, are not grouped together, but mixed into a lot of the Photinus species. I guess what's missing is a little bit of molecular now to either confirm that or reverse the decision. But I know it's a little controversial with some people, and some people have decided not to use this in their publications, and they still refer to them as Ilichnia. I use Photinus for all of them for now until something else is published that shows that that's not the case. And right here where the arrow is pointing, that was the one line that synonymized them. And here is the phylogeny from the paper, and everything that's in blue, the blue names on the phylogeny are Ilichnia species. The black, like bluish ones are Photinus, and you can see that Ilichnia comes out in very different spots. So Ilichnia coruscus is not next to Adar or Salvini or Stormy. So they are, according to this morphological analysis, very different, or the same as a Photinus, not grouped together and not something, different. So that's basically the 2023 paper showing this and giving the evidence why they got rid of or synonymized Ilichnia. This is a list of all the species. This is also the genus with the most common species that are in Canada, and you can see there's quite a few that occur also in Canada. There's a ton of literature. Again, if you want anything, please let me know. there's all kinds of cool research on their sexual communication, on the chemicals they have, all kinds of really interesting things, especially out of the Lewis lab, Sarah Lewis lab, and some Lynn Forst has published some stuff. So very interesting genus. Pyropyga is one we're getting towards the end. There's only 4 species in this genus. The antennae are flattened, and I would say they are subserrate, so only a little bit sawtooth compared to Lucidota, which they get mixed up with. They're mainly black with a little bit of red or yellow on their head shield. This one is Pyropyga nigricans on the right. And you can see genitalia on the bottom of Pyropyga nigricans and modesta, how they're different. And if you want to identify them with a key, if you have a microscope or so, the revision of the species is in green 61 in your folder. Very small. None of them are bigger than 9 millimeter. The genus also reaches all the way down into Argentina. But all of the species look very much alike. And in this case, a lot of times when the pronotum is not very much like really distinctly marked like this one, you need to look at the genitalia to get it to species. Sometimes geography will help, but a lot of times you might have to look at the genitalia. This is the larva, described in Arjanchelsky and Brennan 2001. Again, all the mouth parts and stuff and other things are illustrated. It would be interesting to describe the other ones. So we have like a, we can start comparing the mouth parts within the genus instead of, right now we can only compare them with other genera, because usually I think there's no genus that has more than one described. So it's really something we need to work on. Oh, yeah. This is maybe one of my favorites. Pleotomus described by Green. We have 2 species. Both of them are in Florida. The eyes are kind of contiguous ventrally, or at least almost. They have huge eyes. This gape, so the first segment of the antennomeres is as long as the third. The antennae has 11 segments and has no subspherical bead on last antennomere in case you get these mixed up with Microphotus. We have 2 species, Pleotomus knolli, which is widespread in Florida, and then Pleotomus needhami, which is only known from 2 counties, Highlands County and Polk County. And the cool thing of these guys is they live in ant nests. And the females come out at night. This is these 2 pictures you can use to identify the species. The eyes are huge and they either touch or they do not touch. And that's like the character to identify the 2 different species. You see on the right a picture by Richard again. The females cannot fly. They have shortened elytra. And they live in ant nests, and the immatures also live in ant nests. And there's a really cool paper out by Savinsky, which has the natural history, where they went to Highlands County, I think, and dug out the ant nest. So yeah, that's I'm not sure if I shared that, but if not, I will. But here you can see the eyes are either touching or not touching. Pleotomas, very similar name to the last one. Widespread in the US, the species are. Palens is the most widespread one, then Necropenis and Davisii is from like Oklahoma you can find it, and like a little bit into Tennessee or so. The pronotum is very weakly bent up. And then the antennomeres have on segments 3 to 10, they're biflabellate. So you have these two rami going off of each segment, which you can hear, but the antennae are very short, barely look out from the pronotum. So there's one other genus that has kind of antennae like this. There's a little bit of literature out on these guys. The Zaragoza once synonymized Davizii and Micropenis under Palans, which Jim Lloyd reversed. And then there's a few species in Mexico, a few different species. There are, I think when you find some, you find usually a lot of them, but they're not very regularly collected. And then I think this is power classes. And when you see all the other genera had a subfamily or a tribe listed, this one does not. This is, oh God, this is in Lampyridae in Xerces, and this was done by Martin, Gavin Martin, and the evidence he could not place this genus in any of the groups. So for now, Xerces means that we do not know where exactly it's classified. Identification, the pronotum is weakly bent up on the sides. But if you see these antennae, these biflabellate antennae and black and longish, there is no doubt what you have. That in the US and Canada, you go into other countries, South America, there's other genera that have similar antennae. But for the US, this is what you look at. And if you see that, this is the only thing this can be for now. They are day active, and you find them sweeping alongside water sources. And then the last genus we're going to talk about is Chespirito, which I was lucky to be part of describing the subfamily, the genus, and all the species that are in this genus. There's 6 species, 5 are only known from Mexico, and then Chespirito milleri is the only one known from the US, only from Arizona. And I think none of the species have more than 3 specimens known. And for longest time, they were in collections misidentified as lycids because of their general appearance, until my good friend Vinicius found them in the collections and showed me pictures, and we were like, this has very weird characters. Some of them look lycid-like, some of them look firefly-like, or even some fangoted characters. And so we described them, and they have very strongly setose filiform, so they thread-like antennae, but they have a lot of hairs, so setae, on them when you look at them under the microscope. They have a very strong developed median carina here, so kind of like Pyrectomena, but you can see they look nothing like Pyrectomena. And then the genitalia are very uniquely shaped, distinguishing them from any other genus and subfamily in the US for sure, even in the world. The males are non-bioluminescent, and the females and the immatures are unknown. We think that the females probably have no wings and can fly, but they're, like I said, they're unknown. And the genus was described in 2021, and then we described 3 more species in 2022. And then that's it for the genera for today.